So I was finally able to finish the NFT project, and I'm really happy about that because I had a bunch of problems and things that happened along the way that uh, it feels like it took a lot longer than it should, but I'm very happy that I got it done. And now I'm gonna go through the whole project and I'm gonna add comments and make sure that everything is well organized and documented. And maybe I don't think it will delete any files just so I don't end up deleting something that I might be using, because I just want to make sure that I'm finished with this today and I can send to the silo stuff. But I think I will be adding comments, and then I'll probably redeploy the contracts and then add all the comments, then redeploy the contracts, then test all the functionality of the site, and after that run the build stuff and finish deploying, shipping this. And obviously I'm going to explain everything that I did here, but this is how it looks right now. And I had a bunch of problems as well, so hopefully I can remember all the problems and how I solved them so I can talk about it. In case you're watching this and you want to learn, or you're probably gonna encounter the same problems I had here. Very likely that you're gonna encounter them, so hopefully this might be helpful to you. So let's start from the top here, I guess. The contracts, the smart contracts. I think I'm gonna put some music for myself in the background and not in the stream so that I don't get copyrighted, but yeah, so this is the NFT contract, and there's a bunch of different ways actually that I saw to do marketplace, and the way that I did here is one of the simplest ways you can do it, but it's definitely a lot better if you do the other contracts, which are way more advanced. And I think I might probably at some times, maybe tomorrow or after, go over the other contracts, or look at the OpenSea contract, look at the other contracts that I saw from marketplaces, to analyze them and try to understand the logic. And I also have a couple of challenges here. Also, I ended up minting one NFT on this site because I wasn't sure about the price here. That is a float, but I'll get to that eventually. And because I had problems setting up the price. And this project also helped me a lot to do mine. I look at their source code a lot as I was doing this. And also I think they use someone else's source code from some tutorials I saw. Yeah, it's very similar. Because at the end of the day, there's not a lot that you can do differently from one contract to another, unless you want to get crazy, which is what the more advanced ones do, which integrate a bunch of different contracts and then gets way more complex than that, but I haven't looked too much into it. And then there's also this, I watched a tutorial from Free Code Camp, and then they recommended this stuff as well, and I might do this as well. And there's some articles here that I'm gonna read as well, but this is for later, obviously, after I'm done with shipping this thing. So this is, I separated them into two different contracts because the issue, the way that he did on this project is do everything on the same contract. So both the minting of the NFTs and the marketplace on the same contract. And that's a lot easier to code. But the issue with that is that you're putting the logic in the same place. And in my mind is a lot better. And the more advanced contracts, as far as I can tell, they do the same thing, which it's much better to separate the logic for minting NFTs and for handling the market, because even from a common sense perspective, these things are two different things. It's like a shopping mall and the people getting in and out of the shopping mall. The marketplace is the shopping mall, and the flow of information there is the NFTs. So So it's much better to separate them, true. But the issue with doing that is that you need to figure out a way to connect the logic of the NFT contract with the logic of the market. So you can keep tracking the market, which NFTs are listed and where are they coming from. And this was very hard to do. I had a lot of troubles in the way in some of these functions here. So this contract inherits from ERC 721, which is a contract, Ethereum contract that comes from this OpenZapping library, which is a standard library from Ethereum that helps you, comes with a bunch of functions that pretty much helps you set up the NFT. So this is specifically made it for NFTs, I think, the ERC 721. These other ones come from the tutorial, but this one is for storing the information about the NFT, which is this URI, which is basically a link inside the blockchain to the space where your NFT is stored, which is outside of the, it's not necessarily stored in the blockchain, is stored in an API. And yeah, then I had this ownable as well, which allows you to set a modifier so that only the owner of the contract can call the function. And this pool payment, which is something that prevents people from withdrawing from this contract, people that are not the owner. It makes more secure. I didn't really look into this, but I know they recommend this for security purposes. So I put there to be able to withdraw from this contract. Then I set up the, so maybe I should put here counts the number of NFTs. And the suggestion come from GitHub Copilot here that I have activated. And here is maximum number of NFTs that can be created. So you create this variable and set to whatever you want in order to cap the limits of NFTs you want to allow to be created. This is to set the base token URI. This one came from a tutorial that I watched. This one is the name of the contract, and this is the token. So what your NFTs are going to be called. The same way that Ethereum is if, then you can choose whatever you want here. And this is the constructor, which is activated on the creation of the contract. And it's two different things, but I didn't really understand that very well. But it's on the article that I'm gonna read. Maybe someday, maybe today, maybe another day. And this function is a function that comes actually, I'm not overriding here, but I'm pretty much using the function that comes from ERC 721, which is the safe mint here. And this allows you to connect the address and the token ID. And is what allows you to create the NFT. And this allows you to set a token URI, which is the link from the JSON information to from the NFT to the metadata that is going to create the image itself. So the image is not stored in the blockchain. What's stored is the link to the image, which is the token URI. So with this token URI, you can make an API call to retrieve this information here that should display on the front end. And here I have a require statement so that the token ID doesn't pass the supply. So here I'm going to put get current token counter to keep track of NFTs. So what you're doing is essentially creating the counter on top here, and then every time someone mints the NFT, the token ID is going to be equivalent to the current token, to the current counter. which is going to increase by 1 each time through this increment here. Increases by 1 each time someone creates an NFT. So in this case, it's going to be 1 because you increment before. Mints the NFT. Sets link to UI for the NFT. And then you're required to override these functions by Solidity, which are basically functions that are coming from this ERC 721. And in Solidity, when you're gonna override the functions, overriding is basically creating the same function that exists on one of these contracts, but on this specific contract. So this function exists on one of these contracts, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna override that. You're gonna create the function again, but inside of this contract here. And this is required by Solidity. So this is before I never used these functions, to be honest. It's just something that you're required to do, but I didn't use them, so I don't know much about it. The burn, I know that is used to delete the NFT. Deletes the UI for the NFT. I think I'm just gonna leave it like that, but this might be wrong. Sets the UI for the NFT. Sports interface, I'm not sure. Let's see. Copilot is gonna come up. Something didn't. Sets the base token UI prefix. This is the function that allows you to withdraw the payments from the contract. So before I had set up a fee so that every time that they mint, you would charge a fee, and then the fee would be stored in this contract, and then you would be able to withdraw that with these withdraw functions here. But later on, I deleted the function because I was trying to debug some things, and then I ended up not putting it again because it was just too much work. Basically, I was trying to do a bunch of different things, and then I deleted that to make something else work, and then I ended up not putting it again. And then now if I put it, it might screw up the other things, so I don't want to deal with that. So I think I'm just going to leave it like this. Then this one is one that I had a lot of trouble with, which is set approval for all. So yeah, but basically before I go to this one, what you do is you create a variable just like you did here, and you call it fee or something like that. And then inside of this function, you would call require, and then message.value, which is going to be the message that the transaction requires, the value that the transaction requires. And you put here require message.value to equal or bigger than the value that you put here for the fee. And this would allow you to get a fee each time someone mints an NFT. And then this function here, the reason why I had a lot of trouble with this because this is a standard function that comes from the ERC 721. But the problem is I was trying to call this from the front end, and it wasn't working because it would tell me that the contract doesn't have this function. So what you have to do, at least what I had to do, is override this function, which exists on these contracts here. But the problem is I wasn't being able to override because the compiler was showing me this error here. Function is to specify overridden contract, which is the interface for this contract here. But when you put that there, it doesn't allow you to compile. So eventually I figured out that if you leave it like this, it is not a problem because it allows you to compile and it works fine. So, and this function, pretty much the purpose of this function is to prompt the user of the wallet to allow someone else to handle their tokens. So it's kind of like when you're going to a bank and then you're saying to the bank, I will let you, or maybe an investment fund is a better example. You're going to the investment fund and you're signing a document that allows them to move your money depending on what happens. So it's the same thing here. In the front end, you're gonna have to prompt the user in the NFT Marketplace contract for them to allow you to buy or sell their NFTs. So this is the reason why you implement this. Then after I did this way, it ended up working. So overridden in order to allow the NFT owner to make their NFT available on the market. Okay, so I think this is fine. So I'm gonna go to the next one. This is the contract for the marketplace. So this is already commented here. The account that receives fees, the percentage on sales, and how many items were listed in the markets, which is pretty much the same idea from before, which with the using counters stuff. And this uses something called reentry guard, which is this contract here, which is pretty much something that allows you to protect against attacks that are reentry guards, which are pretty much when someone calls a function from your contract and then they have a default callback function that is going to be activated after the function from your contract runs. And the issue with that is that they can call your contract recursively and withdraw all the funds from your contract because of some specific details that I'm not going to get into, but it's pretty much done to protect your contract from this attack. So here is the struct is pretty much a structure, and I think this pattern a lot, but maybe it's something specific to NFT marketplaces. But pretty much what people usually do is they create a mapping, which is going to connect an ID, which is a number, to some sort of structure, which is this struct here, which is an element that contains certain properties. And then they're going to use that element in order to do whatever functionality they want. So they usually use the mapping to map how many elements exist inside the contract, and then they're going to use the structure to determine what type of logic the element is going to have. So this is pretty much what is done here. Struct is, how can I say this? Structure of marketplace items. Then created a mapping here that maps the ID to the item, which is the structure, and called it items. Another thing that I learned from the Free Code Camp stuff is that these events here, they help you if you wanna, because the best way to do it, and which is, I didn't do it this way here because it's a lot more complicated, but what people usually do is they have a normal application that has a front end and a back end, and the back end is centralized, and then they use these events on the smart contract to keep track of the database, the centralized database. And the reason they do that is because it's a lot faster and it saves on gas. So instead of keeping track of all the transactions that are actually happening on chain, they do these events here that is pretty much every time something happens and the event triggers, is gonna allow people to get that signal from these events. And then people use an API. The one they talk about is Morales. And they use that API from Morales to pretty much register the events that are created on the contract and put that on a centralized database. And then they use the databases to run computations in order to filter the NFTs or to do any kind of logic they want. So all the computation is done off-chain instead of being done on-chain. And this is the reason why they do it. Because if you do it on-chain, it's a lot more expensive. But in my case, I didn't do that because in order to do that, it's a lot more complicated. So I put these events here, but I ended up not connecting with backend. But then there's events for every time an item and offer is made. Events for every time item is bought. Another thing that I saw that they do is they put a bunch of errors here, which are pretty much custom error messages for when a transaction reverts, which is something else you can do, which is a lot better because then when the transaction fails, you have the errors that trigger. And if you don't put that, it's a lot harder to know what's going on. But I ended up not doing this on this one as well. So that's the account that receives the fees and the fee percentage. So this is when you deploy the contract, you have to specify the fee percentage, and the fee account is the contract, not the contract, the person that deployed the contract. So when you're deploying, you specify the fee percentage, and it's arbitrary, depends on what you like. Make item to offer on the marketplace. So this is the function that is listing the item. And the way that I did it on the front end that I'm gonna get through is pretty much the function that mints the NFT automatically calls this function right after. And the logic to display this function, these NFTs, is the logic on the market and not the logic of the NFT. And in that way, I can display any NFT that I want, not necessarily the ones that I minted through my contract. As long as the NFT exists on the marketplace contract, you can see it here. And if I did it based on my NFT contract, then I would only be able to show the NFTs that are minted through my application. That's why it's a lot better to separate into two different contracts. So here I require that the price is bigger than 0. So you can't list an item that has a price equal to 0. Then I increment the item count, which is counting how many items exist on the contract, on the marketplace. I transfer this. Also, the other thing that I didn't understand is what's supposed to be this address here, which I spent a bunch of time trying to figure out. And this is pretty much the address of the NFT contract. So it's very simple. But it can be confusing because what you have to do is actually get the contract, the address itself, and not the abstraction of the contract. So we'll show that in the front end as well. Maybe I should write it as well. NFT the address of the NFT contracts. The address of the contracts. Alright, the NFT was minted. And this is also confusing because this is the token ID from the NFT contract, which is not the item count from this contract here. Comes from the NFT contracts. So this is another thing that I got stuck, and it took me a long time to figure out in another function that I'm going to talk about, which is this one here. Maybe it's not this one, it's the next one. And here there's the modifier known reentrants to prevent the reentrancy attacks. So it requires the price should be greater than 0, then increases the counter, then it passes the NFT from the message to the sender, which is the person that minted the NFT, to the marketplace, which is this contract here, and passes the token ID. And then it creates an item in the item struct. So this pretty much creates the struct from this thing here. It creates an instance of this struct, makes puts on that instance the item count, the NFT address, and the token ID. So pretty much these two things, it's what allows you to keep track of which NFT you have. So that's the part that can be improved a lot from this contract to more complex ones, is that this is a weak link, let's say, and it can be very confusing because you only have two connections, which is you're connecting the NFT address with the token ID, and that comes from the NFT contract. And then on the marketplace contract, you're connecting those two things with the item count from this contract. And that's the way that the logic is designed to allow you to connect all the items together. But it can be very confusing because if you have multiple different people minting at the same time, so let's say you have one NFT contract here and another one here, and they're both minting on the marketplace, you're gonna have multiple different NFTs that are gonna have the same token ID, but a different item ID. And then it can be very confusing to think about this. So it's much better to do it on different ways that have a more clear connection. But that's for a more advanced contract. And then it sets the price, and then sets the payable message to the sender, which is pretty much the seller of the NFT from this struct here, seller, and sold to false, and then emits the event for this. I think this is enough comments here. Let's probably go to this one. So this is the function that allows you to buy an item and receives item ID. And this is where it can be confusing because this is the item ID, which is different from the token ID. The item ID is the counter from the marketplace contract and not the counter from the NFT contract. So it's a different number. And this also is payable and no reentrant. And then it does this calculation here, which is to put on top of the price of the NFT the fee percentage that you set up in the top there. And this also gave me trouble when I was sending, but I'll show on the front end. Then it makes a storage of the items, which is the mapping that keeps track of the structs using the item ID. And this is done to get the specific item that they're buying. And here I make these require statements. I don't think I need to put comments on here because it's pretty self-explanatory with the messages here. Then it pays the seller, updates the item. And then here I updated seller to be the buyer because, so after it transferred the NFT from the marketplace address to the person that bought, I updated the item, the seller property of the item to be equal to the person that activated this function. And the reason why I did this is because on the front end, I'm using the message.seller, which is the person that's selling the item, to filter the items here and to change these buttons here. So because of that, if I don't update this at the end here to be the person that bought the item, then there's no way on the front end to filter for the person that has the item now, because if the seller remains as the person that was selling the item before, it will show a wrong message here. Even after the person bought, it's going to look like they didn't buy it because it's not updating the seller. And this is another complication that you have, and this is why a more complex contract is better as well, is because in this case that I did here, I'm not allowing the person to remove the NFT completely from the market and trade on another market, for example. So the NFT, after they mint on here or they list on here, stays on here forever. The only thing that they can do is update the price or buy. So, and that can be a problem, because obviously if you wanna buy and just remove so you can keep it for yourself or just sell on another market, you can't do that. But the reason why I did this way is because for removing the NFT is a lot more complicated, because then you have to keep track of the items that are sold, not just the total count of items. And then if you're gonna do that, you're gonna need to put another variable here that counts the amount of items that were sold, and you're gonna have to do calculations in order to figure out how much items you have, and you need to use that in order to keep track of this structure and this mapping here, which makes things a lot more complex, and then it would take a lot more time to do it. So I decided to just remove it because I was having too many problems with all the other stuff, and just leave it more simple like this. But it might be something that I do in the future to make this better. And yeah, so I think I stopped here. And then this is the relisting, and this is the function that I had a lot of trouble with, that I spent a bunch of time. And this is pretty much because of the name here. I don't think I'm gonna change now because it's working, but okay, so what this function does is allows you to relist the NFT, or pretty much change the price that exists here. Let me just put some music. Allows someone to resell a token they have purchased, use item ID on the front end instead of token ID to call this function. Yeah, so pretty much I wrote this down because the way I wrote it down here is saying token ID, which makes me think that what I should put on the front end is the ID from the NFT contract in order to call this function. What I actually had to do was put the ID from this contract, which is the item ID, not the token ID. And because of that, it wasn't allowing me to call the function, and it was giving me a generic error that I couldn't find information from. So pretty much every time you call a function with the wrong parameters in the front end, or for some reason you made the function in the wrong way in the contract, it's gonna give you a gas problem. It's gonna say not able to estimate the gas for this transaction, and there's nowhere, at least for now, saying what that means. But pretty much what it means is that there's something wrong with your function, either the way that you design on the contract or the way that you're calling on the front end. And because there wasn't any clear message, it took me a long time to figure this out. But yeah, essentially what I had to do is put the item ID here and the price. And the item ID is captured by the front end. When you click the button, it has all the information through the filtering as well, and through this function here that I'm going to talk about next. But pretty much requires that the person that is calling the function is the seller, because if they are the seller, it means they own the NFT. And the reason why I did this with the seller and not the owner is because I'm separating the contracts as well. So because every time they put the item on the marketplace, they are sending the NFT to the market, the owner is actually the market and not them. So you can't use at least I couldn't figure out a way to use the owner property in order to make the required statement here. So the only other way that I found was to use the seller property. And it seems to work fine. Then I update the property to sold equals false, and I make the price equal to the new price. And then the final function is this fetch market items, which is a function that allows you to return all the items in the pretty much says does what it says here. get all the items that exist on this contract. So you can filter through the front end which items exist on this contract. And the way that it does this is pretty much you specify that you're going to return a list of items here, which is the structure that you're using to map. And then you create a new item, and then you loop through your mapping of the items that exist on this contract. Then you create this new item with the items that exist, which is pretty much a copy. And then you return these items here. So I think that's it for these contracts, and I don't think I need to add more comments here. So probably gonna go through the next. So this is just React stuff. I'm not gonna look into this because it didn't change anything. The scripts is used to deploy. So I think if I want to put any comments here. But pretty much this comes with hard hats as well. There's some command that you do that comes with a basic variation of this, and then through the tutorial they teach you how to do this thing here, which is a different variation, which pretty much what this is gonna do is gonna, at the same time, after deploying both the NFT and the market contract, is gonna create a file that has the information, which is this file here, for the addresses and the NFT. And the reason why this is useful is because you use these addresses on the front end in order to get the abstraction of the contract, so you can call the functions. So this is abstraction of the NFT contract. Then it creates the abstraction, then deploys NFT contracts. Abstraction of the markets, this contract. And here I chose to deploy with 1, which is 1% for the fee. And then weights should be deployed here. Wait for contracts should be deployed. And then it calls this function, which is the function that is created to write the files down, using this FS system, which is file something from Node.js, which is a library from Node.js that allows you to deal with files. Calls function to create store files with the marketplace addresses. So it receives the contract and the name. Maybe I should look it up just so I know what to put here. FS Node.js. File system is probably file system. File system. Then name of file, contracts will be stored. If it doesn't exist, make the directory. Create folder if it doesn't exist. Write file in the directory, parsing to JSON. I didn't look at this file, to be honest. The only thing that I changed here was to deploy the marketplace at the same time that I deploy the NFT. So I have the two addresses in the file. So yeah, there's two different files here. I forgot. I think one is for one address, and the other is for the API, probably. Yeah. but I forgot which one is which. So the first one is for the address. Right, address of contract to file. Right, ABI of contracts file directory parse JSON. And then here you just exit the process. So I think I'm gonna go to the next one. So assets is just the pictures that I inserted here to test if everything is working. It's pretty much useless. Then you have the components here. So the way that is structured is the components contains the JavaScript files for each page, for the functionality of each page. It's pretty much the way that React app works. The app.js is the main page. Actually, index.js is the main page, main JavaScript file that is associated with the file that is going to be displayed. And this file calls app.js. And then in app.js, you have the logic for all the other components. So maybe I should start with app.js here. Also, maybe index.js. So another thing that I had a lot of trouble with is getting the dimensions down on the waiting page. And the reason why is because I couldn't figure out exactly, but I assume that there's some CSS bootstrap that I'm using or some React CSS styling that prevents me from making the body height equal to 100%. And I had a lot of trouble with that. So what I did is put the position to absolute, and after I did that, I was able to make it 100% and get the dimensions right for the page. But I ended up not figuring out what CSS was causing the body to not be able to be 100%. So this part here, as far as I understand, I didn't look too much into this as well, but it pretty much comes from the Silo network and allows you to put the network. I'm not sure if this is a React. I think it comes from React as well, actually. It's a tool from React, but it allows you to specify a network, then attach to the APIs here and specify the chain ID, and also the name of the dApp and the description. Yeah, okay. I'm not gonna put any comments on this, so let's jump into this. So here what I did was to create a routing for the app. Each routing allows you to navigate through different pages, and you use this browser router, which is a thing from React that allows you to do that. Then here navigation is a component that I created, which is this component here that has all this functionality. And the reason why I put here above these ones is because I want this to be on every page that I load. So it has to be outside of this routes page here. Because what this route does is it allows you to... Actually, the thing is wrong here. It allows you to associate one component with each routing of the app. So here in the root routing, I'm gonna load the Explorer component on this routing, which is the default routing for the app, because of the way that is deployed. Also load the Explorer, and then the Explorer is gonna load the Explorer as well, which is when you click this button, and then profile loads the profile component. So I don't think there's any comment that I want to put here as well. And then the only thing that I changed was put min height here, but it didn't work. And then text align center was already here as well. So now I think I'm gonna go through the components. So the contracts are already explained, which is the address of the contracts. I think I'm gonna go through utils first, because components is gonna involve everything, so it's more complex. I think I'm gonna explain this stuff first. This one I ended up not using, so not even gonna talk about it. This one I also didn't use, but it's pretty much helper functions to allow you to do this with the address, to display it like this. This is the truncate address function, and this formats the big number to this decimals here. Just helper functions, but I didn't look into them. And this is the file that allows you to do all the functionality on all the other components in order to interact with the contracts to do what you want to do. I think I'll be right back. I think I'm gonna change the music here. And there's a lot to talk about, so it's kind of difficult to keep track of everything and figure out how to explain it in the best way. So pretty much what this here does, it gets this object object that comes from this API, which is the IPFS, which is the thing that is used to store the metadata from the image. So it creates this from so you can communicate with this thing that is going to store the metadata. So this is the function that creates the NFT. Creates NFT. Maybe it's irrelevant to put the comment here. Helper function for minting NFTs. So what this is going to take is the minter contract, the market contract. Minter contract is the NFT contract. It's async because of the blockchain. You have to do everything asynchronously. Then you get the price, which is the price you're going to list for. And perform actions is something that I don't really understand, but it comes from the Silo network, which is a React component they created in order to allow you to use this. It is a function, and that allows you to do these operations here. So Kit is going to be the default account, and this account is the account that is currently logged into the site, which I put here. Maybe I should put this on top of this, actually. Looks better. And I'm also gonna put here require that NFT has a name, description, and an image. And then it's gonna convert the NFT metadata to JSON format by creating this stuff here. Then it's gonna try to save an NFT using this client, which is the API here. It's gonna add the data to this API with this URL here. So it's gonna pretty much link the metadata to this URL here. And Infura is an application or a site that allows you to do this thing. Mint the NFT and save the IPFS URL to the blockchain. And this is the function that allows you to, it calls the safe mint from the contract, from the smart contract, passes the owner address and this URL here, which is the link to the image, the token URI, and then sends from the default account, which is the account that is connected to the site. And actually, I don't see the, but this comes from here. And this is pretty much going to be called through the components, and the components are going to have an abstraction of the NFT contract and the market contract, and they're going to pass this abstraction through this function. And then through these methods, through these dot methods, you can access any function that exists on the smart contract. And like I said before, if you call this incorrectly, it's going to show you an error that says not enough gas, and is actually not very useful error to get, but what's pretty much saying is that there's something wrong with the way that you're calling or something wrong with the function in the contract. And then here I log the transaction, and this transaction is going to be an object that is going to contain all the information from this call here. And the way that you access the token ID through this is by accessing these properties of the object. You access events, then transfer, then from that you access return values and token ID. And then I parse to int here so that I have the integer. And then with this token ID, I call the create market item, which is another function that exists on this file, in order to list the NFT on the marketplace. And I pass the address of the account that is connected, the minter contract, the NFT contract, the market contract, the price that they listed for, and the token ID of the NFT. And this is gonna go to this here, which is a function that I created to list the NFT. So it pretty much awaits for the set approval for all function, which is the thing that I explained on the smart contract that allows you, it's gonna prompt the user to allow the marketplace to trade the NFTs for them. And then after that is done, it calls the make item, which is the function on the smart contract to create the item. So maybe I should comment this here. Allows marketplace to trade the user NFTs. Creates the NFT item in the marketplace contracts. And this return here is not really necessary, but yeah, it's better to leave it there. So let's go back to here. Access transaction object, access, or maybe get token ID from transaction object generated by the mint function, or mint ready safe mint method call. Calls function that lists the NFT the minted NFT Marketplace. I think I can erase this stuff here. It's pretty much things I was doing to figure out how to do this. The rest is explanatory and self-explanatory. So this function, I also didn't look too much into this, but it's pretty much to upload the image to IPFS, which is this decentralized file system to store NFTs or images without storing them on the blockchain, because storing on the blockchain is very expensive and inefficient. So you store on this different decentralized system. It can be centralized as well. There's a different way to do it. So uploads image metadata to IPFS. Storage file system storage. Uses the client, which is the API stuff, to add the file, and then returns the link. So function should get NFTs from the contracts. Gets total amounts of NFTs in the contract. Loops through all NFTs. And this one also came with the tutorial. Didn't look too much into it, but is translating this into the image information. Is looping through all the NFTs that exist on the item and getting the properties of these NFTs, and then returning them into this in order so you can access them from the front end. So maybe gets NFT token URI, so I can to retrieve NFT metadata. And yeah, then return this. Okay, I don't think I'm gonna put any more comments on this one. Then this gets NFT metadata. I wouldn't put these comments if I wasn't going to submit, because it feels redundant. But since I'm gonna submit to the solo stuff, I think it's better to just be more excessive than to lack comments and explanations. So this is self-explanatory. It uses Axios, which is a library that allows you to make API calls from Node.js and from React, and uses the IPFS URL to get the metadata for the NFT. Then this gets NFT owner, gets NFT contract owner, create list NFT in the marketplace. So this is all for this file. Hopefully everything works after I redeploy this stuff and check all the functionality, so I don't have to spend any more time trying to figure this out, because I have a lot of other stuff to do. So these are helper functions as well. I think I went over this and also talk about cons. So let's look into hooks. These hooks here are pretty much used to make it easier to get the contract abstraction. So pretty much they are functions to get the NFT address and the NFT ABI, not the NFT, the contract address and the contract ABI, and create a contract abstraction. So it's pretty much making it easier for doing these things on the other components. So this one creates calls the use contract, and it's the same for the other one, and it passes the NFT ABI and NFT contract address, and this is for the marketplace, and then it activates this function, which is going to create a new instance of contract using Web3, passing the ABI and the contract address. And then it uses this use callback hook, which is a React hook that allows you to memorize functions. And memorize pretty much means that you're gonna kind of like store them so that it's more memory efficient, as far as I understand. And then uses the use effect. So if address gets contract, so if it has an address, it's gonna activate this function here. And every time an address or get contract changes, it runs the use effect again. Use balance is to get the balance of the user, the wallet. Using this use contract kit, which comes from Cello, which gives you this address, it gives you an address, a destroyer, connect, perform actions, as far as I understand, which are helper functions to allow you to deal with this contract and the addresses, all this stuff. And then it has this function that is on the use contract that runs to get the balance. And this just exports all the functions. So this is stuff I went over already. So now the components. So I think this is the most complex part, and to be honest, is gonna be hard to explain everything, because this pretty much integrates everything from the app. But this is the wallet component. I ended up not using this, but initially I had this. They give you in the tutorial so that you can create the wallet in the beginning, which is gonna have this big number here. It's gonna I didn't use this a lot. Actually, it might be used on some other components, but I don't remember really well, to be honest. But it's pretty much used, and because before I had the first page, there was this component where you click connect and then connects your wallet. But now I'm doing through this one, so I changed a little bit. So I'm not using this one anymore. So I don't think I'm gonna put anything here. And these names of these classes that exist here, these come from CSS Bootstrap, which is something I knew that it existed, but I didn't know the names for the classes. So I think I might as well explain. It's like someone created a CSS file that contains all these standard classes, and then every time you you import CSS Bootstrap, and you put these classes here, it's gonna apply some CSS to the component. So it's a lot faster and easier to use. And this rounded peel here is what gives the shape for the buttons, or for different points. The Y is for padding in the Y coordinates. So it's pretty much done by X and Y when you want to change both the left and right, and Y when you want to change both the top and the bottom. And the other directions you can put, for example, PR, which is padding right, then PL, padding left, and so on. And then this is the number, and I think it is on REM. Then here, obviously, is display flags, align item center, border, and then round the peel, which is the styling. And this is all over this app because it was used a bunch of CSS in a bunch of parts. So the cover is a component that, if I remember correctly, you had the connect wallet stuff to it. Just pretty much to style the wallet, the connect wallet button, but I didn't use this as well because I changed mine to this. The counter I also didn't look too much into it. I didn't think I used this. So whatever, I'll go through the next one. UI is user interface, obviously. And this one I used, but only the notifications.js. So this is for stuff that you wanna style through the page, but you wanna keep it separate so that you can call the component instead of having to repeat yourself and do the same code every time. I didn't use this one. And this one is just the loader from the React Bootstrap, which is the spinning thing that shows up when the items are not displayed. It's just an animation that comes from React Bootstrap and is separated on this component. And then the notifications is for every time there's a call and it succeeds or not. You have these items here, these components, which allow you to display the standard message, this style. So it pretty much separates the logic for the styling of the message. So you can call the component instead of putting the style on the page. So for error and success, I don't think this is, I need to put any comments on this as well. So I'm going to go to the, so here I think I'm gonna go in order. So explore is the first page. It's supposed to be the main page, this one. So this one is the page that shows up when you click here. I use stage to keep track of the NFTs, the loading, and then I use the use market contract, which is the functions that are on the files that I went over. I think it's on hooks. Yeah, use market contract is a mint contract, which is gonna call this use contract to create the abstractions for these two contracts here. Use contract key to get the address that is connected to the site. And then this function is the one that is gonna get all the items that exist on the marketplace contract. So here, maybe it's better to start. Oh, actually, I think I'm gonna start here because then I can put comments as I go. To keep track of all NFTs to map over there. Like if this loader or not. Gets the address of user that is currently connected. Create marketplace contract abstraction. I don't think it's worth it to put any more comments than this. Sets loading to true, so it displays React animation while NFTs load. Calls fetch markets items from marketplace contracts to loop true, maybe get info all the items. Then here's gonna loop map through all items. Maybe it's not necessary to put this, but I think I'm gonna leave it there. That's the token ID for each market item. That's token for each market item. Get the address of NFT owner. Use through filter. Not honorable user. Get NFT metadata. And this is also something that I had a lot of trouble with, which is understanding the units. And I'm gonna talk about this. Get price and make convert unit to Ether. So pretty much, as far as I understand right now, it can be very confusing. But one of the issues I had is because, let me open the contract again. In the contract here, all you see in these functions is uint, the data that is going to receive, the data structure. So the question I had was, how is it possible that to set a price that is a floating number? And this is why I did these prices like this. Because if you're pressing as a float from the front end and this accepts an integer, how is it possible that it works out? But I couldn't really figure out the real reason why, but as far as I understand right now, the way that you're supposed to do it is every time you're passing, you're calling the function from the front end or from whatever, from the smart contract, you need to parse that into ethers, and the value you're gonna parse is the equivalent value in USD. So for example, if you wanna call the function and send the value as $10, you're gonna send it as 10 parsed through this ether here. And then what this is gonna do is gonna call the library of ethers utils, and this library is gonna convert that $10 into the equivalent value in ethers. And the value that is used by the contracts, at least in the ERC 721 and probably in ERC 20, is the value is done in ethers. So the unit that the contracts use are ethers, but the unit you deal with is USD. And yeah, so you should be putting the units in USD and then parsing them into Ether so that the contract understands through this library here. And it is very confusing because it's still a little bit confusing to me because I don't really understand how it works, because what if you're using another currency, let's say, then how do you know that this the equivalent? But yeah. But at least doing like this, it works. So I'm probably gonna study more on that later to understand how the conversion is done. I took a brief look at the source code that is in TypeScript for the numbers big number, but I didn't dive too much into it. Then returns and return and object with all item info needed for other functions. So pretty much getting the image, the description, the external URL. This external URL is something that OpenSea requires you should have if you want to list your NFT on their site as well. And it's pretty much a link that allows you to connect the to connect your NFT to a site. So if you're deploying your NFT into your own site, and then you also want to deploy on this marketplace, you can put the link to your site with the NFT when you're minting the NFT. So people can go to our site as well. Then the seller, the name, price, token right. So if there is no items, then it returns. And because it means that there are no NFTs in the marketplace. And then this, I did it so that I had a way to know. I had a way to display the buttons depending on whether or not the person is the owner, to change the functionality of these buttons here. So when the person is not the owner, it's going to show buy, and when the person is the owner, it shows change price based on the if statement condition that I'm going to show later. But pretty much adds the add remove property for allowing to display buttons conditionally better. And then this return, so it creates this property here and then returns if, another thing that I also had to do was this to lowercase here. So basically, and this is something that I've seen as well in other applications in blockchains, the address can be different even though it's the same address, because in some instance it's gonna be not withdraw is not the best word, but it's gonna be in uppercase and lowercase, and other instances it's gonna be only lowercase. So when you do this strict equality here with JavaScript, even though it's the same address, it's gonna give you an error. And so in order to prevent for that, you have to make it both of them lowercase. So if the address that is currently connected is equal to the NFT.seller, which is the person that owns the NFT according to the logic in the marketplace, then I put this released to true. Actually, I can remove this because now I remember that I changed from remove to released the logic later. So maybe I can remove this, but I think I'm gonna leave it like this. Just so I don't, but maybe I'll put here the comments, yeah. So if the address is the seller, then yeah, it adds this release to true, which is gonna display this change price button. And if it's not, then it's gonna be false, which is gonna show the buy button later. And then I set the NFTs to items. And finally, yeah, okay, this is fine. Here I also was getting a problem. I still am getting a problem, but it's not something that is giving me an error message on the console log, but it's not something that is stopping the functionality of the app. But it's much because of this market contract here. I don't really understand why, but I had to put this here because every time the market contract changes, it's gonna redo this component here. But for some reason, it still gives me a mistake, and I'm not really sure what it is, but it works, so whatever. And then this use effect is what is loaded every time the page is loaded. It's gonna run this use effect here. So if there is a market contract instance, it's gonna activate this function that I just went over. Gets all market items when page loads. And then this is what's gonna be displayed on the page. So if it's not loading, which is this animation here, then I created this div, and it's gonna, if the NFT length is bigger or equal to 1, it means that NFT exists on the marketplace. is gonna create this row component, and it's gonna map through the NFTs list here that exists here, which is these items. And it's gonna pass through this other component here, which I'm gonna show right next to this, right after this. And it passes this information as props, which is basically the information of the NFT, and it maps each component with its own token ID. And this information of the rows is for the dimensions of the page, so it's responsive, and it comes from React Bootstrap. XS is extra small, SM is small, and LG is large. So you can change this, so it basically changes the number of rows depending on how big or small the page is. But I didn't change this, I just left it like it was, but yeah. And so if there are NFTs, this is what's gonna show, and if there's no NFTs, then I created this ring loader, which is a React Spinner component, which is another component that comes from React that allows you to display an animation. And then I also put this text here. And then if it's not loading, it's going to show this, and if it's loading, it's going to run the loader component, which is the component that I already showed, which has the CSVs for the React animation. So now let me go through this NFT. I don't think I'm going to put any comment here as well. So let me go to the NFT component. And this is on this file here, the card, which is pretty much each one of these cards here that shows. So here again, I think I can erase this stuff. Here. Get user wallets address and perform actions function on Silo contracts git. So I'm passing the NFT here, which comes from here. Is this prop here, which is the item that are filtered that I got from the function before. And I'm passing this through this component here as this NFT object, and I'm destructuring so I can access each property of the thing. Handles. Oh. So this is pretty much used to determine if you're going to show the model or the stuff that shows up when you click the button here to update the price or buy the NFT. Handles state of the model. Yeah. Sets price for relisting according to user input from change price button. It's market contract abstraction. And this, like it says here, checks if there isn't an NFT, it's not gonna complete the farm, not gonna allow you to complete the farm, and if there isn't the price, is not doesn't allow you to complete the farm as well, because then it's pointless to relist if you don't have the price. So this closes the model. So this is the function to allows function for updating NFT price after listed. Or maybe just NFT price. And then it uses perform actions function. User will prompt to pay the asking process to complete the transaction. So this I also spend a lot of time with, because of the stuff I already talked about. Every time you're calling a function that requires a price. I think I changed this one, but before I had a price to released. Every time you do that, you're gonna have to pass that the exact price that the function is asking. If you don't pass the price as the message value, which comes from this object here, after the from, and then you put who is sending the message, you put a value like this, and then you pass the value, whatever value it is. If you don't pass the exact value, it's gonna show, the function is gonna show not enough gas. And yeah. So you have to remember which value you put on the smart contract, so you can put here when you're calling the function. And then this pretty much calls release function from marketplace contract, passing let's see, item ID, not token ID, which is which tracks the ID in the contracts. Calls release function from marketplace, passing the NFT ID. ID chips track market item. I want to make sure I comment this because I had a lot of confusion with these ones. It's probably the thing that confused me the most, both when I was creating the tasks for the contracts and when I was trying to build these functions. And it's just such a silly thing that it feels really dumb to spend a lot of time just because of this silly mistake. And then this is obviously specifying that it's from the address that is currently connected. So you use the .send to send it from the address. And then this is that component that redirects user to the explore page. I'm not sure if it's after 3 seconds, so I'm gonna erase that. The rest is explanatory function for my listed NFTs. Uses item ID that keeps track of each market item. Comes from, maybe I won't put comes from. I think this is enough probably. Current address, yeah, is connected to the site. Or maybe just user wallets address. Yeah, so this is the function that is gonna buy the NFT. And for the contract, I put a fee, like I talked about earlier. So I had to, this is another thing that I was getting a problem because I wasn't calling with the exact value. I wasn't adding the market fee. It was giving me the gas mistake. Another thing that took me a long time to figure out. So I think I'm gonna erase this comment here. fee, market fee charged for buy NFT, determines when deploying the marketplace contract. Calculation of total price, NFT price plus fee percentage plus fee maybe. Maybe it's plus fee percentage. Parse total price, true ethers, parse total price true ether actually. I think this is explanatory. Call function from market contracts specifying the exact price of the NFT. If the price is maybe this, if the price is incorrect, wallet will say not able to estimate gas. So it calls with the ID for the specific item and then sends from the address with the price here, total price. Redirects user to profile page. Updates, remove property, NFT, should true. So new button. So the button for buying is updated to change price or releasing. And this is the property that existed that I created on the other page. But now I just realized something, which is that I updated to released. So maybe this is not working. But I remember testing this function before I started streaming, and it seems like it was working. After I bought, it showed me it changed the button, so I think it's fine. I'm just, like I said before, I'm just gonna leave it like this so I can send this to the Cello Challenge stuff. But if it was my project, I would probably look more into this if I had more time to do this, or if I was getting paid to do it. Because these are just minor things anyway. Everything works fine, so these minor things is just for improving and for making sure that everything is optimized. gets the price and parses as the price from the form and updates to Ether. And then sets the price here. So these ones I'm gonna erase. Change price to Ether. So units is correct. Updates price states. And then this is the components, and most of this stuff came with the tutorial. And this is the same thing that I explained before, which is gonna resize the columns based on the dimensions of the page from React Bootstrap. The key is just the index, which is the token ID, which is this thing that shows here, that keeps track of each NFT or each item. Then it truncates the address, which is this. Shows the icon here, icons before, with this component. Then displays the image from the, and this is, all these properties here come from the NFT that is passed through whatever page it is on right now, which in this case is the Explorer. So I have an NFT seller, token ID, image description, the price, and this is the text stuff that shows up here. Because there is no external URL, it doesn't show anything, but if had some, it would show here. And then this is the condition to display the buttons, depending on the state. So I'm using the property that I added before, which is the release property, to check if the person is the owner or not of the NFT. So maybe I should put a comment here. I should do it on JSX because it's being loaded here. Renders buttons additionally. Depending on whether what user is the owner. So if they are not the owner, it's going to show this button here, which has this CSS, these React Bootstrap properties, which create this style of these buttons here, this button. And it's going to call this function whenever it clicks, which is the function that I went over there to buy the NFT. And this one calls the function to release, which also opens up a model when you click. So when you click this button, is this one here, and this is going to open up the model, which calls this function called random show, which sets shows to true and displays the pop-up model. Yeah, and the model here has these properties here, which is pretty much a component as well. And then because it's passing as props, this show variable that is dependent on this function here, it displays the model conditionally depending on the state. If you click the button, shows the model, and if you click close, and it changes the state of the show and then hides the model. And then the model has the form, which has the price, which is going to call the function getPrice, which is going to format the price into ethers, which is the function that exists above there. And then this is to display what currency you want to put. I only put Celo because it's simpler. And I imagine that if you're going to put several different... this is the thing about price that I wasn't sure about and I'm still not sure about, which is how do you make the conversion? I suspect it's going to be if not the same, it's going to be very similar, but it's kind of a weird thing. Because if you put a different currency here, then you're going to have to think about how to translate that specific currency into Ether, because the contract only accepts Ether. So both when you're sending money to the functions, you want to convert to Ethers, and both when you're withdrawing as well, you want to convert to whatever currency you're using, whatever token you're using. So this can be quite confusing. So I just left as Cello, and I'm probably gonna study more about this later. And then the final button clicks the release NFT, which is the function that I went over before, to update the price. And this card component here handles both the logic for relisting, and it handles the logic for both pages, both the Explorer and the My NFTs. The only difference between these two pages is that on the Explorer page, I don't filter. I just map through like I explained here before, I'm just mapping through all the items and displaying them. And on the profile page, which is the My NFTs, I'm mapping and filtering the items to see if the seller is equal to the address that is connected. And that filters the NFTs, so it just displays the NFTs that the person owns. And then the Explorer CSS, this CSS here I did so that it, just to change the color basically. But I also did this so that, which I'm probably gonna show once I redeploy and test everything else, to create this component here. So the styling of this component was pretty basic. So let me go to the profile page. I think I'll be right back. So I'm gonna get some more. Yeah, this one is gonna be faster because it's pretty much the same. I'll be right back. To be honest, I didn't think it was gonna take this long to go over everything, but yeah, it's a lot of stuff to cover. Maybe I'll just copy most of this stuff from here. I think I can make it full screen from screen. I'll split this to the right. Because most of this stuff is pretty much the same thing. Yeah, but I'm really happy that I was able to finish this. It was very difficult. And I learned a lot through the process. And mainly it took me a long time because I made these stupid mistakes that were just simple things that, because it's very difficult to find information, it took me a long time to figure out what was wrong. Oh, here I wrote map. Oops. Also think I should be adding this probably. It doesn't matter that much. I'm just gonna put on all of them. Yeah. Metadata. And then the only difference comes here on these two pages. Because here I'm mapping through them. And here I'm gonna filter as well. So this remove thing is weird. Because I remember that I changed this, but for some reason it's still working, so. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna leave it like this. And then this one, it does the same thing as the other one, but instead of mapping, it filters first to see if it filters to get only the ones that the address is the seller. Filters all items and return only items owned by user. Maps through filters items and sets release property true for all of them. So it's possible to display the release button later on. Sets all NFT or list should be the filtered items. And then here's the same thing. Pretty much. Okay, so what else? So I talked about cards, explore, profile, UI. Oh, and here before, yeah, so I went over all of this. And if I don't remember really well, but I think I used the same one here. To update the price. No, it's probably different actually. Yeah, I used a different one. So maybe I'll talk about. So this function is the one that I used to modify the card component so that it serves the purpose of all the functionality that I want. So I ended up not using this one. And this one is the one that I think I can delete, but I'm not gonna delete it just to make sure that it still works, because I don't want to deal with a bunch of problems if it screws something up. Yeah, this is the one that it's used. It's pretty much the same logic as the card one, but it's the one that is used for this button here to mint the NFT. But the logic is pretty much the same. It's gonna show up the model, and then the model is gonna have this farm data for the user to set the properties of their NFTs. Create state for all the NFT properties coming from the form. So check if so these are the required ones: the image, the name, and the description. The external URL is optional, and this is being called from the main component, which is the create component. This one, which I'm going to talk about next, but it's pretty much passing these properties as props. And these are the properties here, and the rest is pretty much the same as the form with all the inputs, and then sets the input to whatever the user puts there. And then when it creates, it's gonna call the function on the mint file, which is the save, which is the function that comes from the create component. This save comes from this props here, which is being passed through the create component in order to call the function on this mint file that I went over that mints the NFT and sets as a market item. So yeah. So I think the next one, the navbar. Maybe I'll talk about. Yeah, so the only ones left are the navbar and the create. So I'm going to talk about the create because it's linked to the add one. So this is the component that is attached to this thing here. When you click, it shows up the model and allows you to mint the NFT when you click mint and list when you click here. And this is this component here. So state for the form data allows to redirect user after function. It's called. So maybe I should also put this here. Get wallet address, contracts, fractions, checks if the farm is filled, and this adds the NFT. Calls function from the minter No, from the mint. Where is it? From utils. And it's gonna call the function from this file that I went over, which is the create NFT. And sometimes this is really annoying. The suggestions. It's NFT. And list it on the marketplace. Direct user to profile page. Parses the price into Ether. Formats from for inputs. And then this is the component with the model, with the inputs from the forms, setting everything from the form, same as before. And then it calls this function, which is the other function that is gonna call the function from the utils minter. Just gonna mint and list the thing. Yeah, so now the only one left, I think, is navigate. And this one I did this style just to make it proportional here. I couldn't make it work so that all of them are the same proportion. For some reason, I use React Bootstrap for styling these two buttons here. And for some reason, the height is not the same, the shape. And I tried changing the padding and the margin, but for some reason it wasn't working. So I just left it like this, and it's not that big of a deal, I think. And pretty much this makes it so that whenever you hover, it changes the color of the text and the background color to give the effect of this effect here. Yeah, so pretty basic. And then this is not that complicated as well. Get wallet address and connect and destroy from kit to allow user to log in and log out. And then you use the link from React Router DOM, which is gonna allow you to shift the pages based on this dynamic here. So you put whatever component, whatever routing you want on this shoe here, and then it's gonna find on the app.js which route is it, and it's gonna load the component that is associated with that route. And everything on React is a single page only, so everything is loaded on the same page, but it looks like it's a bunch of different pages. But in reality, it's just the same page with different components that are being displayed depending on the logic here. And then to do the styling, you use CSS Bootstrap, which is padding, Y and X here, font bold text, and then rounded pill is from CSS no, I think this is from React Bootstrap and allows you to get this shape here of these things. And then here I put the create component, which I went over already, which is this button here. And then I display the button conditionally for if the user is logged in, it shows connect wallet. If the user is not logged in, it shows connect wallet. And if it is logged in, it shows log out. So if I place here, just connect wallet, then logs in. And so I think this is everything. Finally. So now what I'm gonna do is redeploy this stuff. Oh, I didn't went over the tasks file as well. But I don't think I'm gonna, because I also didn't finish this. It is very important, especially when you're doing Web3 stuff, because after you deploy, you can change the contract. So it's a lot better if you do this tests here every time you modify the contract. So you make sure everything is working before you deploy, instead of redeploying every time. But yeah, I ended up not finishing this because it's just too time consuming and I don't have a lot of time to finish this. I didn't have a lot of time, so I think I'm just gonna leave it like this. And it's pretty much a bunch of tests to see if all the functions in both contracts are working. And what you do is you do this describe, which is gonna describe which tests are you running for. Then you put this before each, which are gonna be the functions that are gonna be ran before, or the methods that are gonna be ran before each statement here in this it. And each one of these it statements is a specific thing you want to test for each contract. I guess the thing that is worth mentioning here is that if you want to test any functions that require you to pay something, then what you have to do is you have to send, you have to make this send transaction from the owner into one of the accounts that you create through this ethers.getSigners, which allows you to create through a bunch of different accounts so you can test. And the reason you have to do this is because the address needs to have a balance. And if you don't do this, it's going to throw you an error. So you do this every time before you run each test, which is going to send some meter from the owner to the account address. And then every time you call a function, you have to call it like this with this object here. So send transaction from, then I have to specify the value. And I think I erased actually. Yeah, but you would put dot from and then, or dot send, and then the value and who is sending the transaction. I don't think I'm gonna spend time on this. And when the function is supposed to revert, then you test with this. Should be reverted with. Yeah, so now what I'm gonna do is redeploy the contracts. And yeah, so this development branch I created to modify all the stuff, then I merged with the master. So there's nothing different on the development besides the comments now. So maybe I'll leave this open because it's gonna open up here. Let me see if I have the command here. Yeah, to deploy, you run this npx hard run, then network, and then you specify which network you're gonna deploy to. I'm deploying to the testnet of the Silos network, which is AlphaJars, the name. And the reason why I'm redeploying is because it's going to create different contracts files here, which is going to allow me to test everything from scratch, because it's going to create different and new smart contracts. So there are not going to be any NFTs on them. Okay, so looks like it was deployed. So now I run the thing. And after I run and test for everything, then I'm gonna run build and deploy with Git, the Git command, the commands they show you, so that you host the website with GitHub. And then I think I'm gonna submit the challenge off stream. And if I encounter any mistakes, then I'm probably gonna either leave it like this and just send it and whatever, or I'm gonna work on them off stream. But hopefully everything goes on fine. Everything works out fine. I'm curious now why it's giving me this. Oh, I guess because I redeployed the contracts. Yeah, so this is the page that I showed, and this is what it shows when there's no NFTs. Which is this component here, and this is there are several different ones. The one that I liked the most was this one. So now I have two accounts on this wallet, and I'm gonna use this shoe, and this one has shoe, this has one. So I think I'm gonna mint with this one that has last, so I can buy with this one. Then I click here. Let me see if I'm on the right. Yeah, okay. I select the image. I don't have any external URL, so I'm gonna put 1.1. Maybe I'll put actually 22, and then I can relist to test if it's working. Now this is the safe mint function from the NFT contract. Then it's gonna confirm this. After it confirms this, it's gonna call the set approval for all, which is the to list on the market. And after it calls that, it's gonna call the other function to actually list it. So set approval for all. Fingers crossed here. Then contract interaction. Maybe it should open like this. This is better to see. And now it confirms and redirects to the profile. So now I have this NFT with that's worth $22. Again, I'm not doing this because I believe in these JPEGs as NFTs. I'm doing this just for the challenge of Silo, so I can submit this to Silo, and because I might do things with NFTs in the future that actually have utility like reducing bureaucracy by allowing people to trade items and ownership without having to do a bunch of different steps. So I think that's the real utility of the NFTs, and it's something that is gonna be that I think more about long term. That eventually everything is gonna be switched to this decentralized. Not, I don't like to say decentralized because it's not really decentralized, but to these ways that we're gonna do things with smart contracts because it's much better to automate things this way. So I believe that everything is gonna move towards smart contracts. So, and NFTs are gonna be the way that the properties are handled. So it's like, yeah. So this is the real utility, I think. It's not just the items. The JPEGs is for something, if you want to sell houses, for example, or anything like that, that requires ownership, then you can use NFTs. And so that's the real reason why I'm doing this, is more thinking about long term. So now I have this here. So this is my NFTs. I can go on this one and it's gonna show as well. Then I can click change price. Let's put 1.1. And it's gonna ask me to confirm. I'll have to pay gas. And this one, I don't think it updates automatically, so I have to reload the page. Hopefully it works. Okay, so it updated the price. Nice. Now I'm gonna change the account. Hopefully the other one is working as well. Okay, so it shows buy here because I don't have the NFT. If I go here, it shows no NFTs. If I go here again and click buy, then it adds the 1% of the fee to the price. So it's 1.111. Confirm. And it's also allowing me to, and then it shows the message to show that it was successful. And it's also allowing me to put prices with floating numbers because I'm using the ethers and stuff, the big number library. And now it shows change price here because it's my NFT now. So maybe another thing I can change is after the relisting, I can see if I'm using navigate. I think it's on the card one. Bar release. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not going through the Explorer if I'm using with the other ones. So maybe, let's see. Maybe I'll do profile as well, just because. I think it was when after I released it. Oh, I understand why. It's because I'm doing this outside of the await perform. Probably. So maybe I'll just move this inside here. I don't think that's gonna break the app or anything. So yeah, nice. And now it shows here, and if I go to the other one, also the balance is updated. So I think everything works fine. And now the other one doesn't have. And now it has more because it made money from the person that bought. So I think everything is working. Now let me go to the other one and try to release it again to see if it's gonna redirect to the Explore page. Nice. Okay. So last thing I'm gonna do after that is, yeah, for some reason, I guess I understand, is it is redirecting me, is not updating the price though. That's the only thing. But it works after you refresh, so whatever. So I think what I'm gonna do now is update this, commit these last changes, redeploy it. Redeploy smart contracts and changed navigation, more cards. I'm gonna push these changes to the GitHub, and then I'm gonna follow these steps here to deploy with. I already followed these ones the first time, so I don't need to follow them. But these last ones, which is pretty much the scripts that allow you to optimize the application. The run build is gonna use something called Webpack, and this is something that compiles all the code from React, all this code here, into a more optimized way, so that the page is faster. And this is the reason why in a lot of pages it shows everything as single letters in the functions, which is something that I didn't know before. And as I was investigating pages, but now I understand that is this compilation thing that happens, that the code that you see usually on these pages is not the code that people actually wrote, is the compiled version of the code that is optimized in order to make the site faster. So they tell you to put this pre-deploy and deploy on the scripts on the package.json, which is the package that handles all the script executions and is a package from the Node.js system. And here you specify which scripts run when you run npm. So here I have to run the build, the pre-deploy, npm run pre-deploy, I think. And they tell you to add this homepage here with the name of your application, with your GitHub user and the name of the thing, the repository name. Npm run deploy. So yeah, the first thing I'm gonna do is npm run redeploy, and this is gonna run the npm run build. And this also puts all of the files on this public here, or the build. I don't really remember that well. Yeah, but puts everything into one file, or optimized files. Then after this, I'm gonna run this deploy, which is gonna set up the GitHub so that it gives me a link so I can display the site. They tell you to navigate to pages and change some settings, but I didn't have to do this the first time. It did automatically for me. And then the only thing that I'm going to change after I finish the stream is to add the link for the site in the README file, and also to submit the thing to Silo. I'm not sure how long this is gonna take, so if it takes a long time, probably gonna stop here. And I think I talked about this. I just minted this NFT on this other site that is one of the submissions because I wanted to understand the price here, how he was making it so that he was able to put floating numbers, which is this repo So I think I'm gonna go into my one, into mine. Okay, so it seems like uh, it updated this stuff. And what this last deploy script does is creates a new branch, which is this pages, which is gonna contain the optimized version of the app to display on this link here. Okay, I'm not gonna do these things. Seems that it works. Now I'm gonna run the npm deploy. npm run deploy. Which runs these GH pages they built. Hopefully, yeah, hopefully it's gonna work. I think I'm just gonna wait, just to see if the link works and shows the. But actually, I think I'm gonna cut it here because the rest of the stuff I'm gonna do off stream. Maybe I'll look since it seems like it is done. Whatever. Oh, actually. But it might take some time until it updates. That's the thing. Alright, still on the old version. Or maybe I have to change the link. Okay, I'll do this. I'll figure this out upstream. And yeah, this is it. And probably next time that I come here, I think I'm gonna read this article at the end of each string until I finish this, which is basically a bunch of things about Solidity. And I'm gonna see if I'm gonna do this speed run, and if not, I'm gonna work on another project that I started with analyzing the decentralized exchanges data. So yeah, and I'm really happy about this overall because it was really hard and I learned a lot. So I'm very happy that I was able to finish until the time I had set for this. So see you next time.